כל מה שהיה פה ישתנה ממחר. הזמן עוד יתקן את כל מה שכבר נשבר. אני שר, יש מי ששומר את הטוב לידינו, הוא תמיד מחכה. כל מה שהיה פה ישתנה ממחר, אם ננסה רק להאמין בלי לדעת, להרגיש בלי לגעת, לדבר עם העיניים גם כשאין לי יותר מה לומר, לשחרר את הרגע, זה טבעי לפחד מהטבע, לחבק חזק בידיים כל רגע לפני שנגמר. כל מה שהיה פה ישתנה ממחר. הזמן עוד יתקן את כל מה שכבר נשבר ונגמר. את כל התפילות הניסים בחיינו מתחברים לרגע הזה. כל מה שהיה פה ישתנה ממחר, אם ננסה רק להאמין בלי לדעת, להרגיש בלי לגעת, לדבר עם העיניים גם כשאין לי יותר מה לומר, לשחרר את הרגע, זה טבעי לפחד מהטבע, לחבק חזק בידיים כל רגע לפני שנגמר. לדבר עם העיניים גם כשאין לי יותר מה לומר, לשחרר את הרגע, זה טבעי לפחד מהטבע, לחבק חזק בידיים כל רגע לפני שנגמר. כל מה שהיה פה ישתנה ממחר.
אם תלכי לי בשנייה עולמי יקרוס, ואם אלך לך תצטערי על הזמנים בהם היינו יחד ושתקנו. הימים עוברים והשנים רצות, ואיפה את ואני באמת? ילדים הולכים, אמהות בוכות, תגידי מה פה חשוב באמת? כמה נתעסק עוד בכאב, וכמה נתעכב עוד על השונה, ואיפה לא היינו מי שאנחנו באמת. הימים עוברים והשנים רצות, ואיפה את ואני באמת? ילדים הולכים, אמהות בוכות, תגידי מה פה חשוב באמת? הימים עוברים והשנים רצות, ואיפה את ואני
Okay, I think we're going to get started. People are still trying to join, but it is being recorded. So in the interest of everyone's time who has come here promptly, let's get going. So hi, everyone, and Chanukah Sameach to all of you celebrating. Thank you for joining us for another JReady webinar in our Swords of Iron series, where we're really trying to focus on sharing updates on the situation here in Israel, the impact that is having on Jewish communities all over the world, and hopefully providing you with some useful knowledge and resources as we face these very multifaceted and collectively challenging times. I'm Sam Robinson from the Jewish Agency. I think I probably know most of you at this point and really feel privileged to know you all from around the world. But if there are any of you that I am yet to meet personally, please do reach out and let's have a conversation, get to know what's going on in your communities and see how we can support you more. Before we get started on the session today, given that it is the first night of Hanukkah, the festival most known for miracles and light, I wanted to share a really brief thought that I learned from the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory. As you can hear my voice, I'm British, and he was one of my teachers in the UK. So I felt very close to him. And I think many of you learned from his teachings and heard his amazing morals and messages over the years. So Hanukkah, I think probably the greatest message that we hear about Hanukkah is that it really commemorates one of the greatest military victories of Jewish history. We often pay tribute to the fact that of all of the ancient civilizations, Judaism is the only nation to have survived. And Rabbi Sachs, in his assertions as to why this was the case, I think really rings true today and given the circumstances that we're going through. So Rabbi Sachs attributes our survival to really the core values of the Jewish people. The fact that we value our homes more than the battlefield, the fact that we value marriage and family more than any kind of military grandeur, the fact that we value our children more than generals in the army. I think that you've probably all seen these positive images and videos that have been kind of permeating social media, as well as the negative stuff, but there are all these positive images as well that have been showing weddings that were being conducted on army bases, reservist parents returning home and surprising their children in schools, you know, all these wonderful messages that really show the value of protecting and defending our homes, our communities as the absolute highest value that we're holding true today. And I think this is where we have all been seeing the light, the really, really bright light during these immensely challenging times. So I just wanted to start with that message. And I'm not going to take much more of your time right now before I hand over to our wonderful guest speaker for today. We're really, really privileged to be joined by Dr. Moran Bodas, Senior Lecturer from the Department of Emergency and Disaster Management of the School of Public Health and Faculty of Medicine at Tel Aviv University. Moran is actually a very strong partner of JReady since we started almost 3 years ago, and has been teaching courses to community leaders all around the world since the beginning. So we're really, really grateful for Moran, for you to be with us here today. And Moran's session is going to be focused on human behavior in the context of emergency planning and management, and how we can harness this knowledge to practically address crisis while we're in the acute phase of an emergency. Moran, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Let's share the screen and the presentation. Whoops. Okay. So hopefully you all can see the presentation. Just give me a clue as whether that is the case. It is good. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Moran. Thank you, Sam, for the introduction. My main field of research, for those of you who are unfamiliar with me, is disaster psychology. I'm very interested in understanding human psyche in the context of emergencies and disasters, human behavior during emergencies and disasters, how people react to disaster rescues, and how you can motivate people for more adaptable behavior, such as emergency preparedness or promoting public resilience. In today's talk, I'm going to, well, the first part is going to be a little bit of a bummer. I'm going to maybe put down the excitement and the environment. We're talking about stuff that we usually don't like to think about, but that will be laying the foundation for hopefully a more happy ending for the presentation, which will give us some understanding about resilience and hope. And I want to start on October 7th. I'm sure all of you have been struggling to cope with that date and whatever happened on that date. There's plenty of reasons as to why that is, and hopefully from today's presentation you can get also a glimpse into some theory that can explain some of the behavior or some of the response that we all had as a result of this situation. Myself, I can remember I was practically a zombie for 48 hours, even more so than that. I was really struggling to cope. I was really struggling to get a grasp of what's going on. The anxiety level was over the top, through the roof. And yeah, and that's a problem. So as soon as you cross the threshold between fear and anxiety to the point that you become numb and incapable of doing stuff, that's when you know you've crossed the line to something that could possibly deteriorate into even psychopathology. So very important to get ourselves out of that situation and move forward as much as possible. And in today's presentation, I hope to achieve a little bit of understanding as to why we were all experiencing this, and a little bit into the human psyche with regards to how that plays out in emergency and disaster planning. So I see already a raised hand. Pietro, would you like to ask a question? Maybe not. Okay, so we ask ourselves plenty of questions. Why did this happen to us? Why aren't we recovering? How do we get out of this? But the question I want to focus this part of the presentation is, why are we never prepared? Why does it seem like every time something happens, it's like, whoa, we were not prepared for this. We were completely surprised. We were completely taken, pushed over with the situation that happened to us. Why is it always the case? Why aren't we capable of achieving actual meaningful preparedness for different types of disasters? And the best way for me to demonstrate this is actually through sort of interaction with you. So I want to present to you this list of 10 items, which is recommended by civil defense authorities around the world for provisions that you want to have in your house for preparedness for emergencies. And as I'm going through the list, as I'm reading it out, I want all of you to count how many of those 10 recommendations are you complying with right now. So by the end of me reading the list, you should have a number between 0, which means you said no to all of these, to 10, which means you said yes to all, okay? And you should have a number which will indicate your level of preparedness. So let's go through the list. Do you have a radio, transistor, and spare batteries to operate it? If all communication, other communication means collapse, so that will be your only option to get information. Do you have a portable battery for your smartphone, like a power bank that you can use to power your smartphone if the electricity goes out? Do you have bottled water in the amount of at least 3 liters per person in the household for a few days? Do you have wrapped and dried food items provisions for at least 4 days to get by on your own? Do you have a fire extinguisher? Do you have a supply of medications for your family needs or an emergency aid kit? Did you create a backup copy of important documents such as your ID, your passport, other documents that you deem important for you? Have you prepared a list of vital phone numbers of family members so that you can contact them if you lose your phone or no longer have access to your contact list? Did you pack a bag with personal necessities for if you need to evacuate? For example, a bag that has clothes in it, baby formula, another pair of glasses if you use those, whatever you need to just grab and go. And have you made a family emergency response plan? Okay, so by now you should have a number in your heads ranging between 0 and 10. And what I want to do right now is ask you to either screen the QR code you see on screen right now, or go to menti.com and use the code you see on the top of the slide right now in order to indicate your result. Once you indicate the result, just scroll down. There's a button you need to press for submit. And so my question to you is, how many of those recommendations are you complying with right now? Good, I see it's working. We'll give this a few minutes just to ensure everyone is participating. Again, you can either scan the QR code, which will take you directly to the survey, or go into menti.com and use the code you see on top here. Then you'll be asked to indicate a number. And if you scroll down, there is a submit button. If you don't press the submit button, it doesn't show, it doesn't register. So make sure to press the submit button. Okay, I see 9 responses. We have more than that in participants, so I'll wait a few more minutes. But you can already maybe start see a pattern here. You know, this is JReady. You are in webinars and seminars and courses, all designed to increase resilience and preparedness. And at least from the responses collected so far, doesn't seem we're doing very well. Not being judgmental, of course. I have to admit, I'm probably somewhere in the same range as you are. And I'm part of the Department of Emergency and Disaster Management, right? Yeah. Ooh, there's someone with an 8. Good. Okay. I'll wait 1 more minute just to allow the remainder of the participants who would like to participate to indicate their result. But I'm sensing you're getting the idea of what I'm trying to say. So even within this small group of people, when we see the distribution of the amount of actions or recommendations complied with, we see that most people are somewhere in the middle, right? Some people are indicating toward one of the 2 ends of the spectrum, but most people are somewhere in the middle, right? And that's the situation. So now I want to take you back to 2009. This is me back in 2009, receiving my diploma, master's diploma in emergency and disaster management. And I guess 2 weeks after this picture was taken, I got one of the leaflets from the Homefront Command, which is our civil defense authority, for those of you who maybe don't know, a leaflet prompting me to prepare my household for emergencies. And I was so smug about it. I was like, oh, come on, I have a master's in a disaster management. Of course I'm ready. And as I was going through the leaflet, I realized I'm not complying with most of the recommendations proposed in that leaflet. And if I'm not doing that, I mean, I'm at the peak of awareness, right? I just finalized and graduated from a master's program in disaster management. But if I'm not doing anything, how exactly do we expect the common Joe, so to speak, to be prepared for emergencies and disaster? What exactly is not working here? Add up to that the fact that during the master's, for my final paper assignment, I was going into schools where the same Homefront Command was going and teaching school children about emergencies and disasters. I was going to do a research to assess whether these kids and their family, their households, are more prepared for emergencies than kids who have yet to go through these Homefront Command instructions. And I won't linger you with any of the results of the research because those were not as interesting. I will share with you the fact that there was a huge refusal rate ranging at, I think, 30 or 40% of parents who refused for their children to participate in my study. And I vividly remember one of the forms that came back with the no response, and the parent there wrote, "Why would you like to scar the innocent soul of my child?" And it really burned into my mind because I was like, listen, lady, your kid just went through the Second Lebanon War, right? It was back then. Your kid just went through the Second Lebanon War. The Home Front Command goes into his or her classroom, teaching them about rocket attacks and wars and earthquakes. And my questionnaire is going to scar their innocent soul? Yeah, yes. My questionnaire is going to do that because we fail to understand the way people perceive risks and react to disaster risk cues. If it's not necessary, people would prefer not to deal with this, not to have this in their mind. They would much rather have lived their lives peacefully and not think and contemplate about hardships and troubles. And it was then when I decided to embark on a journey for my PhD to better understand the psychology behind emergency preparedness. So when I went to the literature and tried to understand what there is there to explain or to predict preparedness behavior, what affects, what motivates people to prepare for emergencies and disasters, I came across this very robust behavioral model, which explains that if a person thinks the threat is likely, they get more prepared. If they think the threat is most severe, then they get more prepared. If they think it's their responsibility, they get more prepared. And a bunch of other factors are tabulated and affect the emergency preparedness, whether it is trust in government and officials and authorities, access of information, ability to access information, that is, emotions and feelings, sense of communality, social norms. All of these are just a mumbo jumbo of variables that are supposedly predicting preparedness behavior. But even the people who created this model, if you take a closer look at the bottom part of the model, they put a line throughout the model and wrote uncertainty. And they put it there, I'm assuming, to explain situation in which the model doesn't work. Well, guess what? It doesn't work. The model doesn't work. In most cases, for most population, this model is just null. I mean, if you test specific variables, you might find some statistical significance, but the overall model explaining preparedness behavior just fails time and time again. And when I went to study this phenomena for the Israeli public, we found, if the presentation would just cooperate, great. We found that the Israeli society, the Israeli public, is not really prepared for armed conflicts. Could you believe that? Armed conflicts happening so often here in Israel. And you see here the same chart we were trying to create before for the cohort of this webinar. You see the same chart here. Back then there were 14 total recommendations, but you see it just normally distributed. So most people are somewhere in the middle. Some people are very much prepared. Some people are not at all prepared, but most people are just somewhere in the middle. And most of the people who are reporting any of the items that are considered recommendation for emergency preparedness are reporting stuff that they do not necessarily for emergency preparedness. For example, a lot of people say they have a flashlight or a torch back home, which they have because they use it for when the electricity goes down, right? Not necessarily because they thought about a major earthquake and things collapsing and they should have this flashlight, right? So even the items that people say they have are mostly dual use items that they do not necessarily for emergency preparedness. And most importantly, for the Israeli society, there were almost no correlates for this behavior. So you remember I said before, if somebody thinks the threat is likely, they get more prepared. If they think the threat is most severe, they get more prepared. None of this seems to apply for the Israeli society. On the other hand, when you ask people if they feel prepared for emergencies, they can assess very correctly whether they are prepared or not. So if before I show them the list of all of those items they need to comply with, I ask them 3 questions. Do you feel physically prepared? Do you feel mentally prepared? And do you know the information you need to know with regards to emergency preparedness? And the responses people provided for these 3 questions are actually good predictors of whether or not a person is prepared or not. So it's not a matter of awareness. Israelis can identify very clearly before they are shown any list of recommended items they need to comply with. They can say, yes, I'm prepared, or no, I'm not prepared at all. So it's not a matter of awareness. And yet, whenever we try to convince people to get prepared for emergencies, what we do is we just assume they are unaware of the threat, and we just do this awareness raising campaigns, right? With these media campaigns or radio campaigns of how important it is to get prepared, and you should get prepared, and here's the things you need to do in order to get prepared. That's not the problem. The problem is not that people are unaware that they need to get prepared or what they should do. They choose to ignore civil defense recommendations during routine time, right? So that's a very interesting phenomena we're seeing. When we ask people specifically, why aren't you getting prepared for emergencies? These are the top responses we got. People say very frankly, it is a low prioritization. I don't prioritize emergency preparedness during routine time. And they also say, I actively ignore the instructions. If it's routine time, I don't want to hear anything about it. I want to live my life. I don't want to deal with this. I want to think about this. I don't want to go through this. I want to lead my life the way it is without thinking about those things. And if you see on the bottom of the list, it's not a matter of people not thinking they can do it, right? It's not about self-efficacy perception or limited resources or limited time. That's not the reason why people don't get prepared. They don't get prepared because they actively choose not to do it. And I want to show you some open text responses we got from people, because these are very reflective, very representative of what of the mindset of Israelis. So one person wrote back, if only they talked less about threat and we could prepare when we need to, but living in constant stress is not interesting anymore. We just grow indifferent. And another person who said, Israelis are just post-traumatic most of the time. We don't want to deal with emergencies if there's no real need to be afraid. And another person who said, more important and pressing issues occupy my time on a daily basis. If the threat is not urgent and immediate, it just gets pushed down the priority scale. And we see this. We actually see this in Israeli behavior. So let me take you back to 2013. 2013, Assad, Syrian president, uses chemical weapons against its own people in the context of the civil war raging there. And then United States President Barack Obama says, either you disarm or I'm coming in with my military. And Assad says, if you're coming in, I'm attacking Israel. And the drums of war start beating hard in this region. And what do Israelis do under these circumstances? They go and queue for hours, even 24 hours in line to get their gas masks, right? The same gas masks they could get for 20 shekels delivered to their house by the post office if they only picked up the phone and schedule a delivery time weeks before. But they I want to say failed. They chose not to do so. But as soon as the threat became, the sense of it became that the threat is now real and imminent, Israelis were willing to pay the price for standing hours in queues to get the same gas masks they could get for a small fee before. And that phenomena, surprisingly enough, has a name in the literature. It's called victimization. And surprising even more, this theory or this explanation was provided by Turkish researchers in the context of earthquakes in Turkey back in 1999. It was under our noses for such a long period of time. And as we do in emergency and disaster management, we just ignore things that are just underneath our noses for a long period of time until somebody just says, you know what, we've been ignoring this for too long. Maybe we should start considering this. And so these researchers from Turkey said back then in 1999 that protective behavior in victimized population, victimized in the sense that they are exposed frequently to a single a single threat. So war in Israel, earthquakes in Turkey, maybe hurricanes in the United States, what have you, okay? So protective behavior in victimized population is determined essentially by fear and belief in personal control. That's exactly what we're seeing here. People are always asking ourselves, is the war happening now? Is it happening now? If it's not happening now, I don't care. I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to hear about it. Is it now? Is it now? Is it now? It's a constant asking of yourself whether the threat is now. Is it imminent? And if it becomes imminent, then they are willing to do something about it. Not if they think it's severe or if they think it's likely. Those things are not determining whether somebody will do something about preparing for a threat. So if you will, this is the theoretical model that we developed as a result of this. On the bottom part on this slide, you're seeing in the gray boxes, you're seeing the complex model I showed you before with all those arrows and stuff like that. If a person thinks that the threat is severe, they get prepared. If they think it's likely, they get prepared. If they think it's their responsibility, they get prepared. That's the old model. And on top of that, like a weight, sits the victimization model, which effectively divides people into two categories. The first category are people which are somewhat mentally resilient. And so they go, again, with your talks about Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, I don't want to hear about this. I don't want to listen to this. You keep scaring us. You keep saying wolf, wolf, crying wolf, wolf. It's not going to happen. They go through a desensitization effect, which causes indifference and procrastination, and they just ignore civil defense recommendation during routine time. And the other category of people are people who, let's say, less mentally resilient, and those talks, those triggers of talking about the next war and how awful it's going to be, and Hezbollah will shoot the entire arsenal of rockets, it just creates fear in their mind. It just creates fear. And then they resort to the most natural coping mechanism there is, which is denial. They just use denial as an adaptive coping mechanism. They say, it won't happen to me. It won't happen to me. It won't happen at all. They go into fatalism and say, it's fine. Whatever needs to happen will happen. And they just go through this process, which leads to the same result, which is ignoring civil defense recommendations. That's what we saw leading up to October 7th. This is what the Israeli society looked like before October 7th. That's a very difficult wall to get through if you are now a practitioner in the community of practice called disaster resilience, right? How the hell do you get through this wall and get to people's minds and allow them to understand that they need to do something about it? Because during October 7th, we heard heartbreaking stories of people who got trapped in their shelters, safe rooms in their houses, locked down for hours, sometimes even complete days without water and food provisions, unsure whether they can get out, whether they're still active shooters, terrorists going outside, and they didn't have the provision. So we want the population to have those provisions in their safe room before. We don't want them to get to the last minute saying, okay, it's now, I'm going to the supermarket to buy the water. No, that's too late. We want them to have all of those things in advance. And surprising or not, we're seeing the same results far away and beyond the Israeli contexts. So what you're seeing here is a pile of a few papers I picked for you, but because there is more. But you can see other examples of how this is coming into effect for other populations, for other threats types, floods, earthquakes, and even pandemics. So this is now a phenomena that we should acknowledge to the extent that it goes perhaps pan-human. It has a pan-human effect to it, that it affects many populations around the world, not just the Israeli society. Personally, for my postdoc, I've been to Italy and I studied the same thing for earthquakes in Italy. I found the same thing. And lately, a student who did their thesis under my supervision, Brett Lefkowitz, did a similar study about climate change risks in Bermuda. So you see that in Bermuda, the chart is a little bit skewed to the right. So people are actually a little bit more prepared simply because they're going through an increased frequency of of climate change, so they have to be prepared. They have provisions from the previous hurricane, and the previous hurricane wasn't too long ago, so they are prepared. But if enough time passes by, the chart will just go back to be normally distributed. And now I want to introduce a theoretical framework, which I think is crucial for us to understand the human psyche under these conditions and why essentially we're seeing what we're seeing. The theory is called terror management theory. You have the authors here, and if you're interested, I do encourage you to read more about it. It's fascinating as a theory, and I think there are some even popular books written. Do I have the one here? No, but it's called how's it called? The Worm in the Core. That's the name of the book, The Worm in the Core, which talks about this, the theory that I'm going to introduce now. So very briefly, because I don't want to be too academic here. What does terror management theory says? The theory stipulates that human beings are the only species alive on the planet to be aware of our own demise, right? So no giraffe rounds the Serengeti thinking, oh, this might be my last day. I should make the most out of it, right? Doesn't happen. And no koala in Australia thinks, what have I done with my life? I've achieved nothing. I have nothing to leave behind. It's only humans that have this tendency or urge to feel this kind of feelings, right? And what the theory says, it says that because we are aware of the fact that we have an expiration date, it creates an awareness of death. And if death awareness or mortality salience in the terminology of the theory, if mortality salience goes through a certain threshold and becomes apparent in our consciousness, it creates this kind of anxiety that we cannot sustain for a prolonged period of time. So no human being can just walk around on a daily basis thinking about his or her own death. It's unsustainable. So our brains have developed through years of evolution, mechanisms designed to attenuate, to reduce mortality salience, keep it at a subconscious level so we don't keep thinking about death on a daily basis. That's the theory. That's what terror management theory says. And what it suggests is that we have several defense mechanisms that help us to sustain this, to reduce mortality salience. So as soon as mortality salience rises, for example, October 7th, right? October 7th was a really, I mean, any terrorist attack could do this, but October 7th was really, really different in the sense of how much trigger it created in mortality salience. So let's say October 7th, we're all experiencing huge high mortality salience, right? And we are now resorting to different defense mechanisms that with which we are trying to reduce the anxiety that is created as a result. Some of those defenses are what we call proximal defenses. These are the things that we do consciously, like saying, it won't happen to me, it didn't happen to me, I'm far away from the scene, I'm not there, it's not happening to me, it's happening to someone else. Things like denial, like helping ourselves rationalize what is going on and reducing our perceived risks. But many of the other defenses we have is what we call distal defenses. Those are unconscious, symbolic defenses that we use. We can use, for example, a defense mechanism called interpersonal relationships. So we feel like we need to hug our close relatives more. We seek more comfort in the hands of loved ones, spouses, children. They give us comfort. Another mechanism is what we call self-esteem. So you saw a lot of people here who went to donate blood because they wanted to help other people, but they also wanted to help themselves by having this sense of meaning. They're doing something, they're worth something under this. And if they're worth something, they're winning over death, right? So they have a sense of like, I'm winning over death if I have some meaning. And another aspect, another defense called cultural worldviews, which is why we put aside a lot of the differences we have as a society, and we now stick together, and we are more willing to accept differences between one another, for example, the Jewish community or the Israeli community, because now there's an external enemy that is very apparent, and there's an in-group, out-group kind of situation where we want to distinct ourselves. So all of these are defense mechanisms that we use to attenuate mortality salience. But now I want to ask you a question. If that's the theory, and if that's what's going on in people's minds, are we doing the correct thing when we do risk communication? When we talk to people, let's say not October 7th never happened, okay? Now we're back to October 6th, and we want to do risk communication to promote public readiness and preparedness for emergencies, right? How should we do this? How should we communicate the risk to people and motivate them to engage in emergency preparedness? The answer most stakeholders, most decision makers will give to this answer is fear tactics, fear appeal. They will say we need to scare people so that they are motivated enough to do something about it. But that's completely missing the point, because if people get scared, then their mortality salience will go up. And if their mortality salience go up, they will use denial to get it back down. They will just use denial to get it back down. So we keep doing the same mistakes over and over again in our risk communication efforts by trying to scare people into doing stuff that is beneficial for them. It hasn't worked in most health behaviors we know nowadays. If you remember maybe the campaign to stop smoking, they put all of these gruesome pictures on the cigarettes pack, trying to scare people out of smoking. That didn't help, right? Most people don't do health behaviors from fear. It just doesn't work. It goes in one ear and then the other one, because they just want to attenuate any fear of death this might arouses. So I want to show you a few examples of how we're doing this wrong. I want to show you a risk communication campaign video from the United States, which is asking people to get prepared for emergencies. And I want you to put attention, now that you know all of the theory behind the human psyche in this context, take a look at this video and see if it's beneficial.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
Right. So by the time it gets to the positive message at the end, people have already been exposed to a lot of images that are very frightening. Yeah, they're realistic. This is how disasters play out. True. But people don't like to see these images if they don't have to, if it's not happening right now. So it goes out one ear and then out the other. COVID-19 was a really prime example of how bad fear tactics were when it came to risk communication. I want to show you one of those risk communication campaigns we had here in Israel, and I want you to pay attention to the audio-visual package here, the music, the colors, the tone. right, so by the time we get to the positive message at the end, most people are just scared out of their minds. I know now we're all COVID-19 graduates and we can maybe look at this and laugh. But back then, try to remember March 2020, people were actually scared. It was an existential threat, so to speak. And people who are scared to begin with, and you use fear tactics to scare them more, they're going to be very compliant at first. But then when the fog of war dissipates and they look left and right and compare the doomsday scenario you told them they're going to happen and what actually happened, they are going to lose trust. And we actually saw this in research. We tracked trust in government, and we saw the collapse after a few months, and it never recuperated. People lost trust in their government predominantly because governments chose to scare them out of their minds, and they didn't appreciate it. And I think no place in the world was worse than Australia, actually. I don't know how many of you live there or know the risk communication campaigns of COVID-19 in Australia, but I'm giving you a fair warning. It's already written here. Here's the risk communication campaign for COVID-19 from Australia.
Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
That's the wrong way to go. That's the wrong way to go. If you're scaring people, you are only triggering their mortality salience. They will resort to their only mechanism of coping, which is denial. And now we want to ask ourselves, so how do we get out of this? And this is where I transition from bumming you out into trying to build some optimistic view to the future. So I told you about the different mechanisms of defense we have within the theory of terror management theory. We can actually use them to help people cope during the acute phase of response to any emergencies. For example, post-October 7th, but after any major disaster and emergency you might experience anywhere around the world. So the first defense mechanism I told you about is the meaningful interpersonal relationship. It's a defense mechanism by which people win over death by having family, friends, and especially children, right? If you have children, then you have continuity, then you won over death, right? You might not live forever, but your children will continue on the generations, right? So using the defense mechanism during the acute phase of the response, you can do that by seeking closeness, by investing in our spouses, in our relationship, and by fostering more friendships. Or as I tell my friends and family, hug your family more, extend the hugs in terms of length, and also appreciate those hugs more than you're used to. You won't believe the effect that hugs have on a physiological level. They even say hug for 28 seconds in order to release those endorphins in your brain. So that's a very strong defense mechanism we have. The second defense mechanism I told you about is self-esteem. This is how people win over death, by having a sense that they are significant, that they are valuable, right? So if I'm an artist, I will write a poem, I will make a sculpture, I'll do a painting, and after I'm long gone, these paintings and artwork stays and bears my name. And if I'm a researcher, I'll write scientific papers, and those stay after I'm long gone. Or if I'm a leader or politician, then I'll do history, and that history will bear my name. So that's the defense mechanism. But in terms of the acute response phase, when we want to utilize this to reduce, to attenuate mortality salience, it's essentially do anything that gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of uniqueness. Volunteer to help, donate, whether it's money, toys, foods. Some people, for example, on October 7th went to donate blood. Promote communal initiatives, and by promoting, I mean be the entrepreneur, be the person doing the initiatives, or simply put, do any action that could create a sense of meaning. Even if it's just baking cookies for your neighbors, if that gives you a sense of purpose, if it gives you a sense of meaning, it can have a robust effect on your capacity to cope with mortality salience and bring it down. And the third defense mechanism is the cultural worldviews. In the theory, it says, okay, if I was insignificant and I lead a life that left nothing behind, at least I was part of a bigger thing. At least I was part of a narrative, a story, a group of people that will have eternity, that will stay forever. For example, the Jewish people, right? The people, the eternal people. So if I belong to the Jewish people, then it gives me some sense of meaning, even if I personally was insignificant in this world, right? Belonging to a culture, to a heritage, to a set of values bigger than myself. And during the acute phase of the response, that is all about communality, the sharing of the values of a single community. We saw that for the people from the communities, from the kibbutzim, from the area around the Gaza Strip, this sense of communality is what's holding them together. They are so happy for anyone coming back, hostages coming back from captivity, as if it's their own child. I mean, we're all very happy, but for them, it's like the community, their capacity to stay together as a group and provide meaning for one another is so strong, so important for their capacity to cope with whatever is happening right now. And on a national basis, on a bigger group basis, this is all about solidarity. This is all about patriotism, love of the country, love of the land, love of the people, and any delay of conflict, right? Israel, especially in the last few months, has been a place where, with a lot of societal rifts, I keep arguing for the last 63 days, we need to put all of those differences aside, and we need to focus much on solidarity right now, because this solidarity is helping us reduce mortality salience. If we go back fighting, they will strip away from us this defense mechanism, and we will just, the mortality salience will just go back up, and we will all experience again anxiety and stress and fear. So having this solidarity, this friendship, this communality is crucial for us right now during the acute response phase to cope. And now I want to go back to the question. So how do we do risk communication? Is there another way of doing risk communication which is better, which is more beneficial, instead of just using fear tactics and scaring people? So I want to go back again to COVID-19. I want to go back to August 2020, third wave. The Homefront Command, the Civil Defense Authority, gets the responsibility to call the people who are confirmed COVID-19 cases and ask them who they've been in contact with in order to put those people in quarantine, right? Try to break down the chain of infection. And so they call these people up and they say, hello, Mr. Levy, you've been confirmed in COVID-19. Who did you come in contact in the last 14 days? About a quarter of the people they rang to say no one. I've been in contact with absolutely no one in the past 14 days, right? Israelis, as if that's anywhere true. Israeli for the last 14 days met no one, right? It's nonsense. Of course they met someone. They're not saying who they came in contact with because they don't want to doom them in quarantine. So think about the social norm that has rooted itself in at least a quarter of the population. I shouldn't say who I came in contact with because then I screw them over and then they get quarantined, right? And so the Homefront Command, who knows something about risk communication during emergencies and disasters, come up with this risk communication campaign. Take a look and listen. It's 180 degrees different from the previous one, but it also does another thing. It rebuilds the sociological norms.
רק שתדעו שאני רוצה לדעת.
תכלס גם אני. כולם פה.
אני חייבת לדעת.
אנחנו באמת צריכים לדעת.
זה לא רק בשבילי, זה גם בשבילו.
מגיע להם לדעת. ובחנתם כמאומתים לקורונה? בתשאול האפידמיולוגי הקפידו למסור פרטים מלאים על האנשים שפגשתם, ויחד נקטע את שרשרת ההדבקה. עוד פרטים בפורטל החירום הלאומי ובמוקד הטלפוני 104.
So besides the fact that it's a brighter palette of colors and a brighter music, it rebuilds the socio-normative attitude. It tries to tell people they deserve to know. You're not dooming anyone to quarantine. They want to know because maybe they have an elderly parent who's more susceptible to the disease. Maybe they have a child in special care needs that if you don't say anything, they will be harmed as a result. And what we saw, and again, I don't know to say necessarily that the results is because of that campaign, because it's a multifactorial issue, but we see that within a month, this percentage of people saying they came with absolutely no one in contact dropped from 23% to 2%. So that starts to suggest that there's an alternative. There is a way of risk communication which is not going through fear tactics. It's actually using something else, the socio-normative approach, right? You see it on the right here. Just imagine, for example, that early on into COVID-19, you would be told the following message. You know this surgical mask that you're going with? Great. It's actually not protecting you at all. Just think about the surgical mask. What is it designed to do? What is it originally designed to do? The surgical mask is originally designed to protect the patient from the surgeons, right? So it's for the surgeons not to spit into any open wounds. They put this mask. So the mask is designed to protect other people from the people who is wearing, from the person who is wearing the mask. So try to think if that was the message, wear the mask to protect other people, just like they do in Japan. In Japan, it's a very robust socio-normative attitude, behavior, that if you're feeling sick, if you're feeling unwell, you go out wearing a mask and you demonstrate to everyone else, today I'm not feeling good and I'm protecting everyone else from myself. There's a way of building up socio-normative approaches that can help other people assimilate behaviors that otherwise they maybe wouldn't do. Another approach to do risk communication is what's on the left here, the utilitarian approach. So that's really taps down to behavioral economics. So let me give you an example. In Israel, if you want to become an organ donor, you need to opt in. You need to sign into the registry of people who are willing to donate organs, right? And so for many years, not that many people joined, because just think about it. What is the discourse a person need to go on in their brains when they sign into the registry? They need to think about their tragic death, possibly at a young age, where their organs are at the prime, right? And then the organs get ripped out of their bodies, and that's most of the time where people say, la 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 la. I don't want to listen to this anymore. I don't want to deal with this at all, right? And then in 2011, a special ethical committee in the Ministry of Health decided that anyone joining the registry, they and the immediate kins will get a priority in organ donations even when they need one. And you saw a spike of 55% in the opting in the signing into the registry. What changed? It's the same behavior. It's the same selfless good deed. Presumably what changed was the discourse people were having in their minds. It was no longer the previous discourse I said. It was now a cost-benefit analysis. What do I get out of it? And if I get something out of it, then yeah, I'll assess the costs versus the benefit. And if it weighs out, I'll do the behavior, right? So just imagine if for disasters and emergency, we had this kit with bottled water and a radio transistor and a power bank and some wrapped and canned food items and whatever it is, those other provisions you need. And you'll have those in your Office Depot or a home center or whatever, those big stores. And the government will tell you, if you buy that kit and you maintain it over the years, you will get some tax reduction. People will go and buy the kit because it makes sense. People are prompted by this. It makes sense to them. They understand the benefit of doing so, and they get prepared. So they don't go through the mainstream cognitions of fear, death, injury. They have a bypass route where they can get to the same result in terms of behavior, but it's not leading them through those fearful cognitions, not tapping into their mortality salience. And the last approach is empowerment. It's risk messaging that is focused on optimism. We actually found that optimistic people are more prepared and anxious people are less prepared, right? We want to empower people instead of scaring them out. We want to empower them with messages of self-efficacy and for sure avoid fear tactics, right? For example, I don't know how many of you know the story of Tilly. Tilly was a young schoolgirl back in 2004 when she visited Thailand with her family. And in the previous months before that, she's from the UK. I'm sorry, I didn't mention. And a few months before she went to Thailand, she learned in her geography class that when there's a tsunami, the seawater recedes and there's like foam on the ground where the water recedes. And 2004, she was there in Thailand. There was a devastating earthquake and a tsunami ensued. And she saw the recession of the water, the seawater, and this foamy accumulation on the ground. And she said, there's a tsunami wave coming. She saved the lives of more than 100 people that day on that shore because she was so convinced of what's happening. She convinced her family, and their family convinced other people, and other people put on the alarms, and she saved the lives of 100 people. Just try to think of a risk communication campaign that says you can be the next Tili, right? If you learn, if you educate, if you do something about it, if you pass it forward, what I'm trying to say is that we need to change a paradigm. People are not just the problem. People are also the solution. And if we stop looking at people as just a problem and harness them into helping us in building resilience and promoting preparedness, we might actually do well. And I want to conclude with this slide, which is what else can we do? What else can we do on the communal level, and what else can we do on the personal level? On a communal level, if you have a communal neighborhood watch, join it. Join it, or if you don't have one, establish one. This sense of security that you might have and being part of this can contribute not only for the actual security, but also for the sense of meaning that I talked about before, and the communality, the sense that everyone is contributing to the safekeeping of the community. Foster communality and strong communal bonds. One of the subsectors of the Israeli society, which is considered to be one of the most resilient, is actually the ultra-Orthodox, because of the chain of charity that they have on a regular routine basis that helps people get around whenever they face hardship. And the same chain or network of community ties can help boost up societal resilience when coping with emergencies and disasters. And lastly, consider performing special communal training. I don't know how many of you are aware of UCARE. UCARE is a great European project which does training for Jewish communities in Europe, fostering communal resilience and training people on how to cope and deal. All of these kinds of training can provide people with tools and skills that they can harness and use when time comes. And what can you do on a personal basis to help yourself? So first things first, acknowledge the fact that it's okay to help just a single person a day, and it's okay if that person is you. It's perfectly fine. So helping one person a day, even if it's just you, is great. If you can help more than that, perfect. But if you helped only yourself and everyone helped only themselves, we can be a resilient community. So that's one thing. Second, acquire the knowledge and the skills to help others. Not only is it going to foster a sense of self-efficacy and a personal, meaningful perception of yourself, you can actually help people when time comes. If you know first aid, if you know psychological first aid, if you know light search and rescue, data shows that following a major earthquake, within the first 24 to 48 hours, 95% of the people who are rescued from underneath the rubble are rescued by laypersons, by neighbors, bystanders, friends, family. Perhaps do a training on light search and rescue, how you can use a metal rod or a car jack to pick up a ton of concrete and extricate a person who is trapped underneath the rubble. If you have this, and if in every street corner, there is at least one person who knows how to do this, we can create more resilient communities. And lastly, I talked about this in the beginning, know the difference between fear and anxiety. Listen, fear is a natural emotion and a very good one that we have. If we fear nothing, we take unnecessary risks. So fearing something is great. You want to fear risks. It is when fear transitions into anxiety meaning that you can no longer sustain the fear, the emotion, and you become numb and you cannot do anything. It actually stops you from doing something. This is when it becomes a situation where you need to seek help, right? So understanding where your personal threshold is between fear and anxiety is important. And once you can recognize the fact that you transitioned from fear to anxiety, this is where you should seek out help, whether it's a friend or a professional. Do something to help yourself so you don't get stuck under these circumstances. And with that, I conclude, and now we have time for questions. I don't know if we have time. Samantha will say if we have time.
I would love to give everyone time to ask a couple of questions.
Okay.
We can give like 5 minutes. So if anyone has questions to ask. No pressure.
Yeah.
Okay. So if people don't, Zipporah, you have a question? Go for it.
Yes, don't mind. Just a quick question. When you showed the video of the how COVID transferred from one person to another, and you showed the red and how they press a button, and the person who then goes there and presses the button contracts it and then passes it on. Why did you look at it as a fear-inducing video? I assume, or I believe that there were people that saw it as an informative video. So what I want to know is, how do we recognize the difference between what would produce fear and what would be informative?
Right. So I want to assume that anyone engaged in risk communication who creates risk communication campaigns is doing something to provide people with information. If they're not providing information, they're doing nothing, right? So any risk communication campaign is informative, right? Now the question is, what is the package? What is the, which emotions does the risk communication campaign triggers, right? And this specific campaign was, I think, was triggering, going with fear tactics because of the music, which was creating a sense of urgency, the colors, red and black, and the sense that it spreads very quickly to a vast area. You know, the entire city is colored red. And also another mistake that was made there, which is, you know, I know it's a little bit of hindsight, being smart in hindsight, but we know now that COVID-19 is actually not contracted by touch, right? And so if you do this kind of campaign, which is laced with fear tactics, and then down the line, people say, you know what? You know nothing about what you're saying, because now they know it's not contracted this way. They say to themselves, you scared us for nothing, right? So it's okay to say, we think it might be contracted by touch. So for the time being, use wipes and wash your hands. That's a good hygienic recommendation anyways. But maybe as time progresses and we learn more information about this specific bug, we learn that you no longer need to use gloves, et cetera, et cetera. That is a much better message than the one I showed, which was laced with fear tactics, because now people can attach this emotion they have, the negative emotion they had, with trust. And does it break now? Because they felt bad, they no longer trust the message.
Thank you. I got that. Thank you.
Excellent. One more question, if anyone wants to ask and jump in. Go for it, Kevin.
Good evening. This is actually a question towards maybe JReady and also to you. I've noticed from the beginning, and I think it was only normal, that most of the communities have been listening to anything that's going on by WhatsApp and sending messages to one friend, to this friend, resending articles, and they're just so much, and they're deep into everything that's going on, that they don't realize that it's not as bad as they really think it is. And I keep on telling people, well, you know, listen, I know what it is. My son's in the army. He's actually in Gaza now. So I understand that you want to know everything, but the more and more information you're getting, you're not getting the whole picture. You're getting all upset. You're not sleeping properly. you're thinking of things that don't exist. And it's not only what's happening in Israel, but I'm in Belgium, but everybody's crazy about anti-Semitism and everything. And at the end of the day, they're blowing up like a big balloon when it's much smaller. There is risk and everything, and I agree. Wouldn't it be, or maybe you already have something that you can send out to the community saying, okay, this is the situation. Please, take this approach and you'll see a better image. Take this approach and you'll understand better. You don't need to panic all the time. You don't need to be in this situation. Now, I don't know if that exists, or I don't know what you think about that.
Right. So let me say this. Whenever there's a threat, especially if it's perceived as an existential threat, right? A threat that is creating a lot of mortality salience, it's very natural for people to try and collect as much information as possible. It makes perfect sense, because the more you know, the more you understand the risk out there, the better your capacity to cope with it and save yourself, to survive. So it's actually evolutionary correct to look for as much information as possible. Add up onto that the fact that we are living in a society and nowadays age where we have a lot of FOMO. I don't know if you are familiar with this, FOMO, fear of missing out. So this tendency that we always have to know everything that's happening the same moment that is happening is a very much a psychological, socio-psychological phenomena that is shared between many people. During the first week after October 7th, we did a survey. We asked, we distributed a questionnaire trying to look into the viewing patterns of the constant 24/7 news coverage here in Israel, and trying to assess how it affects the well-being of people. And what we found was that people were reporting the following. They said, the newscasts are burdensome, they are stressing me out, I cannot turn off the TV, and I don't try to avoid them. And it's all happening together. All of the things I just said were happening together. And when we looked at the prevalence of stress symptoms, such as sleeping difficulties, accelerated heartbeats, fearful thoughts, they were out the roof, like around 50 to 60% prevalence of those anxiety symptoms reported by people. About a quarter of people reported all 4 symptoms, which makes them very likely to develop psychopathologies down the way, PTSD.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I know these people and in more and more groups, and they're going crazy like this.
So, okay, so now I want you to put aside the judgmental part, because you said both panic and crazy, and I want you to try to think about people not as a problem, because telling about people that they are crazy and panicking is taking a look at people as if they are the problem. People are reacting in an irrational way to an irrational management of the situation. If you allow the newscast to do 24/7 broadcasting of the same 5 seconds video looping around and around because they have nothing else to show, then it's irrational and people are going to behave irrationally to it. So now it's our task as community leaders, as decision makers, as stakeholders, to allow people also a venue of receiving the information in a way that is prompt, efficient, timely, so they don't go seek the information in the other outlets, but allows them to frame the information in a more relaxed manner, in a more constructed way, right? But if we don't do this and we just leave them to seek out the information in the regular venues, which are going crazy, they will get crazy. So that's the mindset we need to change. That's the paradigm we need to change. It's not that people are just a panic mob that we need to control. Is that if we understand how people perceive risks and react to disastrous cues, we can manage or create more favorable behavior, more wanted behavior, and avoid unwanted behavior.
Okay, I agree. But wouldn't it be interesting and helpful if something can come out like on TikTok or something like this just to be able to share with the community, giving these examples and showing them, because I think it's really hurting the community, and a lot of people don't realize it. It's going to come out later, I believe.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, just based on what he was saying. Hi. I'm originally Australian, so thank you for showing that clip on Australia, but I live in New York. And I'm part of OHEL Children's Home and Family Services here in New York. We've been doing a lot of trauma support and a lot of work with schools. And Sipora Friedman's also part of our trauma team. She's done a number of interventions. Is it reasonable, the advice that, I mean, I don't want to call it even advice, some of the support that we've been giving is recommending that, you know, if people are really struggling with or, you know, constant the addiction to want to know and to want to feel some sense of control by looking at the news, to kind of say, would it be helpful to you if you made certain intervals for yourself during the day where you do check the news? You know, you continue about your routine as much as you can, but you kind of take control over your social media use and over your checking of the news, and just be a little more intentional before just grabbing for your phone all the time. Is that even reasonable to give that approach to people?
It's reasonable if the characteristics, the personality of that person allows them to transition one type of control freaking into another type of control freaking. So if their control freaking is finding its outlet by constantly updating in the news, and now you can transition that into let's take control over your routine, so your routine doesn't collapse. Then that makes sense. But if that person is not a control freak, rather they are just looking over the news all the time because they have fear of missing out, or because they have this a personality trait where they want to be the first to tell the guys everything. So they were the first to find something and share it with other people. Then they have other personalities, and you need to adapt your response to that kind of personality. It cannot be one size fits all. It cannot. Right. So you have to understand the personality traits of that specific, what triggers them, what prompts them to that behavior, and trying to find a different outlet for them to exercise this part of their personality in a more beneficial, constructive way.
Right. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. And Moran, your candid conversation is always so appreciated and so important. And I wanted to thank you for once again imparting your phenomenal wisdom on all of our JReady network for the benefit of these community leaders around the world. Really incredible as always. For those who want to experience this session again or share it with others in your communities, as you can see, it's been recorded, and we will have the recording available in the coming days. I opened with a brief thought on Hanukkah, and I thought to maybe end with a brief thought on Hanukkah as well. So for those that are into lighting candles, there's this custom to display them outside your home, or, you know, in the window which is visible for passers-by. Now, over the past couple of months, with everything going on here in Israel and the reverberating impact on communities around the world, we've been flooded with these messages of warnings to Jews around the world to not display any kind of religious symbols, concealing their Jewish identity. And I thought it's very poignant that this message of Hanukkah, where we're supposed to be publicly displaying our Judaism and publicly displaying our gratitude for the nation that we have and the strength that we have and the resilience that we have, displaying that in public. So I'm just making that connection, and, you know, constantly hoping and praying and being there for you physically and with resources and whatever we can do to try and restore that feeling of strength, and try and restore that feeling that you are able to proudly display your Jewish identities and your connections to the Jewish communities out there in public. And hopefully this Hanukkah, we're able to bring that light a bit into the open and really live freely and securely as Jews wherever we are in the world and wherever you are. So thank you all for everything that we are able to do together. Thank you for all that you do for your communities. We really adore you. We're so grateful that you're part of this network and that we have your partnership and friendship with JReady and with the Jewish Agency. We really are here for you. So please do reach out to us at JReady and the Jewish Agency. Keep those lines of communication open. Update us as what's going on wherever you are. And also, if you have any requests for further sessions, specific themes, I mean, Kevin, you've mentioned some things that are very prevalent in your communities that you're experiencing. If you want anything additional to what we're providing, do please be in touch, and we will try to assist you as best as possible. So guys, thank you so much. Chanukah Sameach, and Am Yisrael Chai.
Definitely. Bye, guys.